This like the latest installment of the GeoMedia Speaker Series. It's my great pleasure to moderate this small speaker series lecture today. Today, Professor Johan Lindquist will give a lecture on the platformization of the follower factory. Before we begin with the actual talk, just let me say a few introductory words about Johan. Johan is professor in the Department of Social Anthropology and has previously also served as a director of the Forum for Asian Studies at Stockholm University. He has been involved in many fascinating research projects, for instance, shadow economies of the internet and also circular migration and migrant training. I personally think that of a particular interest for this group of GeoMedia researchers is Johan's scholarship in mobility and migration studies, but also his contributions to platform studies. Johan has served also as a member of the editorial board of Pacific Affairs, and he has obviously a very long-standing publication record. I can only present here some of the highlights. He has contributed and made written important articles in leading anthropology journals such as Ethnos and the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute. And he has also published in leading media journals such as Social Media and Society and also Platform and Society. And in addition to this, he has also made contributions to the interdisciplinary journal Mobilities, which I think is also a huge inspiration for many of us who are kind of somehow affiliated with GeoMedia studies. When it comes to further publications, he has also been a co-editor of the edited volume Who's Cashing In? Contemporary Perspectives on New Monies and Global Cashlessness. And he has authored the monographs Figures of Southeast Asian Modernity, and also the other monograph is entitled The Anxieties of Mobility, Development and Migration in the Indonesian Borderlands. So I believe there are a lot of common grounds, as you can already see from the different topics: platformization, mobility. These are things that we discuss very often here at Karlsruhe University. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Johan. I look forward to your lecture, and you can now get started. Welcome to our university.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Christian and Andre and all of you for coming. It's a pleasure to be here, and I feel, a certain affinity to this idea of geomedia, as I'm very much interested in the relationship between ethnography and media, and we talked about this over lunch. How do we sort of develop new kinds of methodologies within this kind of problem space? So this is an example of the kind of work that I'm doing without sort of situating ourselves in digital ethnography or some kind of subdiscipline. So I'm really interested in sort of identifying problems and then thinking about what kinds of methodologies can we use to address those problems across different kinds of spaces. I started out as a migration scholar, but also used some STS in trying to think about migration. But sort of stumbled upon this project when I started to read about when Donald Trump was running his first campaign, and there was Antonio Casilli who was in Paris, did a blog post on the spikes in Trump's Twitter accounts, and so I became interested in that. Actually, you could purchase, Twitter followers on the web. So, and because Indonesia, which is where I've worked under long parts of my career, was a kind of hub for social media. Jakarta was named the Twitter capital of the world. Jakarta is the most geotagged city on Instagram stories, for instance. So it seemed like a good place to start to think about this market for what we call social media engagements, which is, any kind of engagement basically across platforms. Anyway, so let me just get going, and I hope that we can have also a conversation about this work. All right, so this is Wayan. Wayan is relieved. Following Instagram's latest significant security update, his primary supplier in India has resumed providing Instagram followers. Wayan resells these Instagram followers to his more than 2,800 registered clients in Indonesia, half of whom subsequently resell them to other buyers, many of whom further resell, creating a kind of cascading chain of transactions where each seller profits through arbitrage. So in this business model, social media users are sold in bundles of Instagram followers, likes, or any other number of engagements in the thousands or even millions, rather than struggling to develop their own forms of amplification. Neither Johan nor his resellers control the actual Instagram accounts that are the source of the followers. They are in effect reselling the right to followers controlled by Johan's Indian provider or someone further up the chain, which once a series of payments have been made will be transferred to the final processing account. Purchasing account. So this might be a high school student in Yogyakarta in Indonesia, or a social media manager at a startup company in Jakarta, or a buzzer who's paid to post for brands or opinions. Oops. All right, that one's missing. I don't know why. So Johan's business is centered on a modular website that has been created precisely for the purpose of automating the buying and selling of Instagram followers and other social media engagements. So this is an innovation that has allowed him to quickly scale up his business, making him one of the major resellers on the Indonesian market. So reselling via the website is largely automated and demands limited technical skills, which allows for easy entry into the market. The major threat to automation and Johan's business is Instagram's recurring security updates, which, as in this case, halted the transnational market for days before developers figured out workaround methods. So in the meantime, using laptops and cell phones out of his residential house on the outskirts of Jakarta, Johan and his 5 co-workers frantically engaged with their resellers via WhatsApp, promising that the problem, which they had no control over or specific understanding of actually, would soon be resolved. So social media platforms are significant commercial forces, not least for the users themselves. This is something that we all know. The quantification and metrification of user engagement is the heart of the attention platform economy, in which the ability to gain, gather and retain engaged audience is valued. So football superstar Ronaldo, for instance, reportedly makes $1 million per Instagram post, and while perhaps hundreds of millions of people around the world are trying to make a living off of their social media accounts today. So in the wake of these transformations, journalists and scholars have revealed an illicit and extensive global market for so-called fake followers or inauthentic engagements or simulated influence. Services like Instagram followers, YouTube views, and Spotify plays are readily available for purchase. So the organization of this market, which we call the market for social media engagements, has been described using industrial metaphors such as click farms, follower factories, as in this New York Times feature, or digital sweatshops located generally in the global south. So a significant part of this market, however, has become centered not on clicking, but on a digital ecosystem that facilitates the reselling and distribution of engagements. So emphasizing automation over manual interaction, a process that we characterize as the platformization of the follower factory. So this transformation has fueled rapid market expansion and allowed resellers such as Johan to scale up, which in turn has necessitated a more complex labor organization, including marketing and customer service and other administrative tasks. So Perfect Panel, this is their website, is the leading global provider of modular websites such as the one Johan uses, generally called panels by market actors. They supply the infrastructure that allows the market to function and offers an entry point for understanding the workings of this reselling ecosystem, and allows us to explore the interconnections between its different platforms, their geographical locations, and the labor involved. Now, while continuing to refer back to Johan, I'll further describe the most popular panel and a major provider of social media engagements in this ecosystem. Just another panel to show how services are sold and resellers profit in and beyond the ecosystem. So I know that this can be slightly complex to understand how this system is working, so let me just repeat it, maybe in different terminology. Now, imagine, for instance, that Christian is like Perfect Panel. He's an expert on creating panels and rents these web shops that facilitate the automatic reselling of Instagram followers. So that's what he does, right? He doesn't deal in social media engagements. He deals with, he's in the market for the infrastructure that makes this possible. So about 20, the rest of us in this room, many of us in this, about 10 of us in this room, there aren't even 10 people, so 7 of us in this room rent web shops directly from Christian, and you pay maybe $50 a month for that. None of us, however, have access to Instagram accounts, but need to purchase from other sellers. This is comparable to drop shipping, for instance, which you may be familiar with, in which where a seller lists products for sale online without holding any inventory and profits through price differentials. So you now have a web shop which allows you to resell followers, but you don't have the inventory yourself. So you need to purchase this. This is the big market secret, is who controls the inventory, who controls the millions of Instagram accounts that are the source of the Instagram followers, right? So this means that every reseller, everyone who's renting a website from Christian in this room, are often buying from each other as we struggle to find the best service and the lowest price, and ultimately the source of the accounts. For instance, if there was a social media manager for the Center for Geomedia Studies who is concerned with that their Instagram account does not have enough followers, finds my web shop, they will pay me 100 crowns for 1,000 followers. I'm in turn purchasing the same bundle of followers from someone else in this room, maybe, who is selling it to me for 90 Swedish crowns. So I'm making 10 crowns on the sale without actually having anything to do with the Instagram followers or the accounts itself. So once the purchase is made on my website, there's a transaction to the other website, and the chain continues until we reach the source of the Instagram accounts, who then transfers the followers. So people are making money in a chain, but there's one person or one group controlling the accounts, and we don't generally know who that is. That is the big market seeker. We know a lot about the reseller economy, but very little about the production. We can talk more about that later. Now, so what's happening here is then you have the purchasing and selling and reselling take place in a digital ecosystem that's outside of, yet dependent on, the corporate platform. So Christian has created the basis for this ecosystem through his development of this panel form that he then rents to everyone else. So that's outside of, it's autonomous from Instagram. Yet the ecosystem remains dependent on the accounts that are hidden in the corporate platform itself. So this is where we introduce the term para, right, signifying beside, adjacent to, and also beyond or distinct from, but analogous to. We approach the engagement market as a para-platform ecosystem, suggesting a hierarchical relationship between common forms, an auxiliary platform ecosystem inhabited by actors like Johan alongside a corporate platform ecosystem, such as Instagram. So despite the ease with which social media engagements can be purchased through reseller platforms, the operations of the engagement market remain opaque, even to the resellers themselves. We approach this opacity with a mixed methods approach, focusing on the distribution side of the market. Our methodology has combined ethnographic research with digital methods to investigate the engagement market through 2 interconnected processes, the emergence of the para-platform ecosystem and the situated local impact of this ecosystem on market actors in the global south, with a particular focus on Wayans in Indonesia. So I forgot to say actually from the beginning that this is also a collaborative project with Esther Weltevrede. I mean, I will get into the methodology, who is at the Digital Methods Initiative in Amsterdam. So together, we've been working together to develop methods and ways of understanding this broader market. And I'll explain a bit later on how this collaboration developed. So the growing body of research on social media manipulation and online engagement marketing reveals a diverse and complex empirical field. Many of the actors and enterprises in the market operate with a front end and a back end that reflects the boundary between the legal, between the licit and the illicit. The actors we're concerned with often align themselves with licit businesses by describing the market that they're engaged with in terms of social media marketing services. In contrast, investigative journalists and scholars depict a kind of vilified black market for social media manipulation. The platformization of the follower factory, however, leads us to reconceptualize the literature on online manipulation through platform studies. This is grounded in the work of scholars who define platformization in the following way: as infiltration of digital platforms and infrastructures and economic processes into diverse sectors such as games, healthcare, and transport. In business studies, it would be termed primarily a multi-sided market. So our research focuses on dynamics at the peripheries then of major social media platforms. And this builds on work that conceptualizes the platform as a kind of ecosystem, emphasizing the expansive, processual, and relational nature that extends beyond the platforms themselves to include developers and end users and other stakeholders. This is evident, for instance, in social media, the social media economy's role as a key site for entrepreneurialism that straddles the boundaries between work and leisure, as well as platforms' strategic use of partnership to create asymmetrical dependencies, for instance, within Airbnb and Fedora are a couple of examples. So the project also attempts to make visible entrepreneurial activities, labor relationships, power dynamics, and more generally, actually existing forms of platformization at the fringes of social media platforms. So this is in line with work, on content moderators, ghost work, the remote gig economy. Some of the examples see above, which has highlighted the concealed and precarious global labor force that works for tech giants like Amazon or labor platforms such as Upwork. But while that research has focused on labor organization through corporate platforms, such as taxi drivers working and being paid through Uber's platform, our research turns to labor innovation taking shape alongside these platforms. So again, the para issue, which is in line with the para platform ecosystem that we're concerned with. On the one hand, this helps describe and conceptualize the relationship between modular, small-scale reseller panels at the center of the market for engagements and corporate platforms that dominate social media. On the other hand, this hopefully allows us to decenter platform scholarship from the margins. So thinking about what are the limits of the platform? How do we understand the contours of the platform? And what difference does this make? So in particular, Michel Serres' influential conceptualization of the parasite highlights this kind of conflictual asymmetry, yet productive relationship that characterizes our case study. The parasite appears as a third party, in this case, between social media platforms and users, as para-platforms disrupt and redirect so-called authentic engagements between users on social media platforms, while concealing their role in the actual process of mediation. So the parasite or para-platform creates a kind of new modality of exchange that remains dependent on the hospitality of the host, Instagram that in this case, which has the power to authorize or withhold resource or access. So importantly, all actors gain in this process, right? So social media platforms gain through intensifying traffic, which generates revenue through advertising, and the market is allowed to continue to exist. So this is also an entry point for thinking about how social media platforms themselves are governed or not governed, right, for certain kinds of reasons. So to make the engagement market visible for description and analysis, we developed a mixed methods approach using ethnography and digital methods, exploring and trying to example different kinds of entry points into this ecosystem. Initially, and based on my extensive research and experience in Indonesia, I contacted around 130 engagement sellers in the country via internet searches, 30 of whom actually agreed to meet in person. Around a quarter of them repeatedly in the 2 years leading up to COVID. So, and of course, they're easy to find, right? Because they're selling something. So easy to identify these different sellers. And if you can't identify them, they're probably not very successful. So these were generally mainly young men based in the greater Jakarta region and other major cities around the country. In ethnographic terms, I learned quite a lot from this kind of salvage ethnography about work relations and diverse forms of practices that I'll return to later. But the limitations of the classic sort of ethnographic approach quickly became evident in understanding what was clearly a sprawling and highly networked market. In other words, what was valuable with this ethnographic approach, in which I maybe was able to observe some work practices, but generally not hang out too much. One reason for this was the age difference. So they're 20 and I'm not, so they sort of quickly lost interest in me. So what was valuable in this ethnographic approach was what I learned was that this process allowed me to elaborate on new forms of problems. It gave me a sense of labor organization, but it also allowed me to understand that there were sets of relationships that I couldn't quite understand. So it led me to develop new kinds of questions, but which also demanded new kinds of methodologies in which ethnography was insufficient, right? And so this is what led me to sort of approach Esther Welteverde at the Digital, who's one of the founding members of the Digital Methods Initiative, and to sort of see what we could do with the material that I had in developing different kinds of digital methods. So I won't walk you through the whole process here, but through my Indonesian interlocutors, we were able to identify Perfect Panel, the infrastructure, the panel maker, integral role as the host and website provider for the ecosystem, and to use it as an entry point for data collection, which enabled us to map the ecosystem over time. So using internet domain research tools, notably a reverse IP lookup, we were lucky to be able to identify over 2,900 domain names on the same server, the number of customers renting panels, and the countries that they were registered in. So all of this data we could scrape in different ways. As it became clear that the Perfect Panel was the key global panel provider, we connected all of all the websites that were in service. So there were about 1,100 of them. And about 11, I think, or 12 agreed to be interviewed via Skype. So it's about the same return as for spam, right? 1% or so. And they were based, interestingly, in Australia, Bangladesh, India, Serbia, Taiwan, the United States, Morocco, Egypt, Russia, and Turkey. So still, we had a wide-ranging sort of geographical sample, and these interviews then built on the knowledge that I had gained through my fieldwork in Indonesia. So the reverse IP technique thus provides with a comparative overview of the Perfect Panel ecosystem, while the ethnographic interviews and observations offer qualitative insights into labor organization and market practices, but they both depend on each other. So, as I said, Perfect Panel is a critical entry point for mapping the para-platform ecosystem. They offer a standardized admin panel, the back end of the website, with features such as user panel, administration, dashboard, payment methods, activity logs, and a template editor that allows the client to shape the appearance of their website. So here's, what's going on here? For some reason, I'm missing some of the um, slides. So this is quite similar. So you get the ready-made web shop, right? So this is similar to the Canadian company Shopify, which supplies e-commerce platforms for online stores. So the Perfect Panel business model is then based on a monthly fee of between 50 to $200 per panel per month, depending on the number of orders. So for resellers, the market entry threshold is therefore low, as both the cost of renting a panel and the technical knowledge for its operation are minimal. And Perfect Panel even offers customer service and tutorials to help you set this up. So this enables what's being called a kind of low-code entrepreneurship that drives rapid expansion and high volatility with actors focusing on reselling rather than the task of creating social media accounts. So this is one of the this is a visualization of the results of the panels over time. We can see here that from 2016 we have about 100 panels, and then we see a great expansion around COVID. Just continues up until the end, until 2022, when our sort of data set ends. So the red here is panels that end operations, right? So there's a high volatility here. So the majority of the panels actually stop operating quite quickly. So we rented a panel for a month or so and did some work trying to sell on the Swedish market, and without profiting, of course. But then dropped out. So this is something quite typical. There's a low-level entry point, but then it's very difficult to make money because there's so much competition. But about 8,000 people in total have rented from Perfect Panel, and there are about at this point there were around 2,230 panels in operation at the end of 2021. So there was a notable dip in early 2020, likely due to enhanced detection by social media platforms, particularly Instagram, which led to the discontinuation of many services. So if you don't have services either, there's no market, right? So it's not just dependent. This expansion also depends on the availability of engagements that you can resell in this market. So about 40% of the panels leave the market within a year. So the Perfect Panel then shapes the affordances of the interactions that take place on the market by offering these kinds of standardized functionalities and highly templated panels. Panel renters have the flexibility to customize their panels by selecting from 10 distinct styles and 3 themes. So here's like 2 versions. This is the very basic version that you get right before, if you don't do anything with it. You just basically, there's a username, password, and you log in to purchase as a member. This is a slightly more advanced one, but you can tell according to the format quite easily. This is another visualization we use in order to show the visual similarities between different kinds of panels, right? Quite similar across the board. The white are the ones that are not in operation, but we see a striking sort of visual symmetry to these panels. So it's quite easy to identify a perfect panel website, though of course there are other developers that are mimicking the style as well. So people who are renting these websites can choose from a range of functionalities to tailor the setup to their specific needs. There's an integrated payment mechanism which supports over 110 payment methods. So it's really a kind of global reach with regard to this. which is vital for facilitating the panel's adaptation and integration in local markets, obviously. So the customer's data is also hosted on Perfect Panel's servers, which made the reverse IP process possible for us. And the point of this is to reduce hacking risks, but it also outsources server maintenance, which is quite complicated also because of the kinds of security updates that happen on social media platforms. Most of the interlocutors that I interviewed agree that Perfect Panel is the dominant panel provider because it has the best functionality, and also that the owner is very reliable, often referred to on a first name basis, and as a friend or even a sheriff, which is a kind of interesting metaphor with regard to this type of market. So, but the ecosystem's defining feature is its flexible network of interconnected panels. So it's interconnectedness, which is critical, which unites resellers, customers, and service providers within this kind of multi-sided market, which is one definition of the platform. Each panel incorporates APIs, application program interfaces that are instrumental in enabling the distribution of engagement services and payments seamlessly through this platform ecosystem. PowerPoint APIs are of course ubiquitous to the digital economy, used when ordering an Uber, for instance, as the switchboard operator is replaced by an automated call and response. So APIs enable every panel in the ecosystem to select and connect to providers of engagement services that are integrated into the Perfect Panel ecosystem, or conversely become a service provider that offers services to other panels within the ecosystem. So you want to be the panel or the website that people are purchasing from in order to survive in this market. So this is from the website that we ran for a while called Instaakuten. And you can see here how the APIs is actually integrated into the panel. And it has clear instructions about how you set up connections to other panels. So the APIs then create conduits through which engagement service can be resold across the network and facilitates engagements and corresponding payment flows. So critical to the process of scaling up is that reseller panels are not just renting from Perfect Panel, but can be integrated from outside into this expansive ecosystem. So it's this integration and automation that are central to this kind of platformization of the follower factory. So even websites that are set up to resell engagements that are not produced by a Perfect Panel can be connected through APIs, and I'll return to this a bit later. We can also say a bit about the geography of the ecosystem. So the rise of the Perfect Panel ecosystem is taking shape through the proliferation of panels worldwide. Many of the English language panels appear to be physically located in former British colonies such as Bangladesh, India, Nigeria, Malaysia, or the Philippines. And this illustrates the predominance of the global south within the para-platform ecosystem, while suggesting that English language skills also offer access to a broader global market. Some of my interlocutors in Indonesia, for instance, who did not speak English very well, worked strictly on the Indonesian language market, but a few dreamed then of going global by developing an English panel, suggesting though that there's a kind of bifurcated system within this panel ecosystem. So as you can see here, we have the most panels we found were this is of course a very we can't be certain about this, but we use different kinds of indicators here. I'll come to the indicators in a minute, but we can see how countries like Brazil, Nigeria, India, and Turkey are the biggest, are the countries that have the most individuals or groups renting from Perfect Panel. So these were the indicators we used to sort of create this map. So we can see text that directly speaks on the website. This is directly aimed at one particular country. Is a strong indicator of location, we would say. The interface languages is medium. It varies. So if it's offered in Indonesian or in Swedish, for instance, it would be a strong indicator for location, we would say. And phone numbers also medium, but not very strong data. Registration data is generally weak, we would say, because a lot of them would be registered, for instance, in the United States for various reasons. Because of the US position within the global internet economy, of course. So we can see also there's geo-targeted engagement services. So you can buy Instagram for followers that are German or Swedish or Brazilian. So this would also be an indicator of the location of the websites. Because, and I'll get to this later, one of the reasons that we know this is because they have menus of what they're selling on their websites, which are openly available also to scrape beyond any passwords. All right, so many of the panels we encountered ethnographically were run by groups of young men like Johan and his collaborators, often based in the same cities like Jakarta, Cairo, Istanbul. Johan, for instance, initially excelled in the mobile game Clash of the Clans and realized that he could sell advanced accounts on online marketplaces. And this was a kind of entry point for him into online business opportunities. And this is a typical kind of story among the people we met, how selling game accounts was an entry point. So the scaling up, professionalization, intensifying competition that followed the platformization of the follower factory demanded then, as I mentioned, a more diverse labor organization as social media marketing and customer service in particular, but also administrative work on spreadsheets like Google spreadsheets or blogging for improving Instagram. Google rankings, for instance, became important in sort of becoming visible, right? As in the face of all of this competition. Here we have WhatsApp, customer service communication, which lists of services are being sent. So this kind of work, right, is being done. So young men like Johan then developed small cottage industries with friends, neighbors, or family members, not only in Indonesia, but also among interviewees in countries such as India, Morocco, and Turkey. So we see this kind of interesting pre-industrial form, right? The cottage industry is then connected in a highly networked environment. So we have an interesting sort of combination of pre and post-industrial metaphors at work here in this form of labor. So the platformization of the follower factory was then centered on sort of forms of informal labor organization that are common, familiar across the global South, as what Abdulmalik Simon calls the urban majority has developed the capacity to stretch and provide work. So while a laptop computer, a cell phone, internet connection offered easy entry into the market, the major investment was the time it took to learn how the market functions. So in parts of the global South where digital competence is high and underemployment and what Craig Jeffrey calls time pass is pervasive among the educated middle classes, the engagement market then appeared as a compelling opportunity, one among others, of course. So Johan's business appears as a good example of how the para-platform ecosystem has taken shape on the ground. He uses a website developed by an Indonesian panel builder who's successfully mimicked Perfect Panel. Like many of our Indonesian interlocutors, however, he connects with excuse me, and purchases social media engagements from a panel hosted by Perfect Panel. He tried several different providers before settling on his current one in India, who offered him excellent customer service, reliable services, and a VIP account with lower prices since he has purchased for more than 50,000 US dollars. So the provider had even come to visit him once on Bali, though I knew little about his life operations or the source of his services. By dropping prices significantly, Johan was able to develop a large group, about 2,800 resellers, quickly becoming one of the leading actors on the Indonesian market. So this kind of distinct architecture of a principal equal stakeholders in the market infrastructure facilitates this kind of hierarchical layering of service providers and resellers, not least because resellers tend to purchase engagement services from a small number of providers or panels. And this is, as I showed earlier, done through a simple registration and payment process on the website. Now, recruiting and retaining resellers that allow panels to scale up and increase profits through automation is absolutely critical to this business model. The leading actors on the Indonesian market must therefore offer inexpensive and reliable engagement services, tutorials for resellers, bonuses for top resellers, and post testimonials of successful resellers on Facebook in order to create a reseller community. So if I host a website and I have access to inexpensive and reliable services, what I want to do then is to set up as many resellers as I can, in which I make money on each transaction in an automated fashion, right? Here's an example of this attempt to create this kind of community among resellers. Here's a posting. Johan posted this on his Facebook page, and it's a WhatsApp message from one of his resellers, where he writes, from our friend in West Papua, as he writes at the top. God is great. Bless Johan with the money I made. I purchased a house, boss, with 10 rooms for 400 million rupiah. And then he has this kind of, the cell phones and the cash below there. So these are kinds of typical postings that are aimed at creating reseller communities. There is, however, also an enduring instability and uncertainty among resellers who are dependent on providers and co-workers and face intense competition. Since knowledge is the primary investment, this also creates a great deal of instability and volatility among groups of people working together in these cottage industries. So they easily splinter as co-workers, open their own panels in order to gain greater profits. So in other words, while the ecosystem as a whole is relatively stable, there's an intense volatility and competition within it. So while raising profit margins is important, establishing a sustainable reseller business depends on delivering high quality engagements from accounts that do not quickly stop following or are closed down by platforms. Since Perfect Panel does not offer recommendations for where to purchase engagements, resellers are left to figure out which panels or providers offer the most inexpensive and reliable services. And once you open a panel, you will often also be approached by a provider offering these kinds of services. So resellers develop different kinds of knowledge networks through different forums and engage in ongoing tinkering and experimentation with the different kinds of services. The major producers of social media accounts in the bottom of the market, so to speak, remain then a major source of speculation. So the reseller, as I've noted again, and the reseller economy is based on profiting by taking advantage of price differentials. For instance, a buzzer in Surabaya may choose and purchase 1,000 Instagram followers from the menu on Johan's website for €5, But these followers, in fact, come from his provider in India, who sells them to Yuan for 4 euros, allowing a profit of 1 euro per transaction. The followers the buzzer purchases from Yuan's website are delivered by the Indian website from actual accounts without any manual action from Yuan, since the panels are connected through APIs. So the chain potentially extends indefinitely, since the Indian website may also be a reseller. So I've been able to, for instance, identify in the Indonesian market at least 5 levels of resellers for the same engagements. So in order to understand this a bit more, we developed another method, which was to identify one service. This is one service that we found identified quite clearly in this way, and we basically did a Google search for this, and we found all of these different panels with this differential in pricing, right? So we see just another panel, which is generally considered the center of the ecosystem, and which I'll get to soon, had the lowest prices. And then you see how the price goes up here from around 3 or 4 euros per thousand up to 15, just over 15 euros per thousand. So you can see this process of arbitrage sort of as it takes shape, though we don't know who is buying from whom, right? It might be that these are actually buying all from just another panel. They might not be buying from one another, or it's unclear. But we see price differentials with regard to the same service. And of course, if there were no price differentials, there would be no market for the reseller market, right? And we can see here also that the blue are those that are renting from Perfect Panel, and the purple colored are outside of the Perfect Panel network. So we might also add that Yuan has 2,800 resellers, right? As I told you, but and very few of them are actually renting from Perfect Panel. So the majority of the websites and panels on this market actually are not from Perfect Panel, even though they are the dominant global supplier. So we can imagine then that the 2,300 or so websites that are selling social media engagements are just a small proportion of all the websites that are running globally. Okay, so finally, let me turn to the relationship between the para-platform ecosystem and the social media platforms that they're profiting from. Despite corporate platform security measures leading to account closures, shadow bans, and other restrictions, providers continuously innovate to create good enough accounts that remain active and form the basis for engagement services. So the para-platform ecosystem depends on the infrastructure and user accounts of social media platforms. Nevertheless, it can also be distinguished as a unique and autonomous entity because the distribution and sales activities occur beyond the immediate control and oversight of corporate platforms. So this dynamic establishes the asymmetric and parasitic relationships as the para-platform ecosystem operates under what might be termed the hospitality of corporate platforms, essential for delivering its market services. So the market's core product engagements are sourced from accounts that are concealed by the ecosystem's design. As I mentioned, the production and control of these accounts are major market secrets and generate different theories on black hat marketing forums and among our interlocutors. So one of our Indonesian interlocutors even believed that Instagram itself was the main sources of these accounts. He couldn't believe that it would be possible others. But most of our key interlocutors believe that there are a limited number of maybe a few hundred major suppliers globally. and that key panels in the perfect panel ecosystem, such as just another panel, this panel, are also key providers, though no one could know for sure. So just another panel which is one of the websites that is renting from Perfect Panel. It's a reseller site. Was pivotal as the primary entry point for tracking also popular social media engagement services over time. We use the Wayback Machine of the Internet Archive to compile annual snapshots of engagement services offered by just another panel, allowing us to analyze and chart the expansion and diversification of these services. As of March 2021, the site advertised over 2,500 distinct engagement services from more than 40 platforms. While there are numerous iterations of each service, unique engagements such as Instagram or Like or Spotify Play are assigned specific identification numbers. So this is a typical example of what a menu on one of these reseller websites would look like. And this is just one page we pulled, and you can see, Instagram female followers, Instagram followers Indian Max, Instagram Brazilian, Instagram female followers, Instagram female Indian followers. The list is endless, right? Just another panel, as I said, 2,500 different services. So all of these then are open. They're not behind. You don't have to be a member to see these lists. So this is what made it possible for us also to track services in different ways. And one might ask why? What's the point, right? But I think we can all understand that for instance, many of people. There are many, for instance, hijab influencers in Indonesia, right, who sell hijabs on Instagram accounts and want followers. But of course, they don't want male followers. They want Muslim female followers, because otherwise it will appear odd to have that kind of following. So depending on what kinds of needs you have, or what kind of visibility you want to produce for your community, you're going to want to sort of order different types of engagements, and this is becoming increasingly possible over time. And here's a kind of visualization of this. It's not terribly easy to see, but you can see here is this is just another panel services over time, and we can see here is, for instance, Instagram, and here are the years. So you see here Instagram followers, Instagram services are expanding over time. This is the biggest field of services that just another panel has. We can see YouTube is second, and then Facebook, and we can see a big jump, of course, for Spotify when around 2020 or so here. And TikTok is still, very small at this stage, but today, I would imagine that Instagram and TikTok might be on a comparable level, but we haven't done the latest services. So a lot of these services also, we can see how they're discontinued. Here are parts that are discontinued each year, the white here, because those particular services are closed down. So new services have to be produced all the time because of security updates. Some may endure, others do not. So critical to developing accounts then is this kind of ongoing cat and mouse engagement with platform security updates. Most market actors agreed that Instagram's increasing updates were improving actually the quality of bot accounts, because becoming, as one of our Indonesian interlocutors put it, as human as possible. So while you could have an Instagram account within the Instagram ecosystem 10 years ago without any posts, without any images, that's not possible anymore. It will be closed down as suspicious. A Turkish interlocutor put it the following way: high quality followers are very important. If your account doesn't have some profile photos and posts, it's worthless. If you create profile pictures, names, and at least 3 posts that match, it's like they're real. So this, those who are producing these kinds of accounts have to do it first to convince Instagram's algorithms that they are real accounts, and also to convince the buyers that these are high quality accounts. The same Turkish producer of accounts gave another interesting example in which he had different bots that he created, accounts that he created, had automatically direct messaging each other. So this was, of course, not for the purchaser, but it was for Instagram's algorithm, so that they could identify a kind of authentic kind of engagement among the accounts that he was producing. So there's all of this kind of workaround methods to secure the account in the face of security updates. All right, so I'm reaching the end now, and I just want to summarize this kind of some of the main points here. So the platformization then is traditionally associated with Silicon Valley corporations, central to the kinds of monumental shifts that we've witnessed, right, through digitalization. So complicating this narrative, we illustrate how platformization has become widely available at the margins in informal and often illicit economies, ranging from social media engagements to actually cases like ransomware. Here's an example from the New York Times, in which there's a ransomware industry which offers similar kinds of dashboards and customer service that allows, for pretty much anyone to engage with in ransomware operations. So there's also an infrastructuralization then of the ransomware market. So if it's happening here, I mean, it must be happening elsewhere as well. So this has led us so this highlights how individuals, even those with limited technological expertise, can engage in the market by purchasing or renting automated platforms through this kind of low-code entrepreneurship. So this has then led us to introduce the term para-platform ecosystem, which delineates the asymmetrical and parasitic dynamics between corporate social media platforms and the para-platform ecosystem. So these para-platforms then seemingly are to a degree autonomous, right, and empowering as they profit from social media accounts and navigate a delicate balance, the kind of threshold of accommodation between acceptance and resistance by corporate platforms, which are then primarily regulated through account closures or these kinds of shadow bans that most of you are familiar with. So by focusing on para-platforms, we aim to shift the perspective away from the sort of conventional platform narrative and explore, I would say, at least three themes then that come up. First is the question of geography. The corporate platform economy is typically associated with the global north, whereas the para-platform economy predominantly resides in the global south. So this project then enables a more precise mapping of the para-platform ecosystem, its origins and the global distribution of its panels. Field work and interviews with the panel owners indicate then also that the market is segmented by language, by the English, non-English bifurcation, which also suggests a kind of post-colonial form of differentiation, right? So you have countries like India, for instance, which are at the heart of this ecosystem because of English language skills. Second, I'd like to highlight the forms of digital labor characterized by automation and professionalization and extensive forms of networking, which is organized around what we term then the platformization of the follower factory. So the platforms have facilitated market entry, but it also demands more diverse forms of labor, including social media marketing, customer service, and administrative tasks. So a lot of the work is actually making yourself visible to a market in which people would purchase your engagements rather than someone else. So this is absolutely critical. It makes them more firm-like in a way, right? Than the kinds of informal engagements that we have seen earlier. So fieldwork also suggests that labor is often organized in cottage industries involving friends, neighbors, and family members, and this aligns with historical labor practice also in the informal sector in large parts of the global South. Finally, I'd like to just note that this allows us to reconceptualize and to rethink or think more differently about engagement on social media. So the formatting of engagement, such as followers and likes, has made it a metric for comparison and thus a basis for creating value through differentiation. Yet the valuation of these engagements diverges across different stakeholders. Corporate platforms view them as indicators of activity and popularity, impacting both the company's market value and its ability to generate advertising revenue. Users see engagement as markers of social validation or as a means to monetize influence, particularly for influencers endorsing brands. And advertisers rely on these metrics to judge the effectiveness and reach of their campaigns. And within the engagement market, these very interactions then are commoditized. So scholars like Chris Kelty, for instance, have argued that social media engagements have become formatted procedures driven by a perpetual need to contribute, thus eroding their intrinsic value. So this study that we've done then unveils, I would say, just the beginning of the vast scale of purchased engagements. Perfect Panel has reported about 5.8 billion orders, each constituting consisting of one to has reported about 5.8 billion orders. We don't know if this is true, of course, but it signals sort of the scale of what is going on. And this urges a critical reassessment of the value, I think, attributed to engagement by users, advertisers, and platforms alike, hinting at widespread manipulation within the ecosystem, which is only likely to intensify with the ongoing mainstreaming of AI technologies, of course. So with that, I think I will end, and I look forward to hearing questions, comments, and maybe other ideas. So thanks a lot.